Like, where is my kid gonna have the best version of the climate apocalypse? And then all I am is defined by others, and I really don't like that. Hi guys, and welcome back to my channel. If you're new around here, I'm Yvette. I moved to the UK 2.5 years ago and I'm documenting my experience. And so today is Waffle Friday. I don't know if we're still going with that, but still not sure about it. But I thought I wanted to make a video on something, on a topic that's close to my heart. I am a woman, in case you hadn't noticed. And something that happens to women, basically since 25 upwards, is you get asked constantly, are you gonna have, when are you pregnant? Are you pregnant? When are you having kids? Like incessantly. And I think it's something I always think about, because if I ask myself, do I even want kids? Would I be a good parent? Could I provide a lifestyle that I would want them to have? Would having kids provide me with the lifestyle I want to have? All questions I ask myself. And I think society has been getting better. And I read a statistic the other day that said 50%, this was UK, 50% of women who turn 30 are child-free. And so that's a mixture of an increased amount of people who are choosing child-free lifestyle, and then also women having children later. But I just think of, you know, there are so many factors to take in consideration in terms of, you obviously, if you have kids, you lose your, I'm going to talk to the negatives and I'll talk to the positives. So this isn't going to be completely, or at least my idea is what might be negative to me might be positive to you. So I think I enjoy being lazy. Not really, I'm not actually that lazy, but I do enjoy laying on the sofa and doing nothing sometimes. I budget that into my schedule, just, which is just to make sure you have some downtime, you know. And I know if you have a child, that just goes away. People say having a kid just means you're stressed and worried forever. And so I already have anxiety, as we're well aware. So I'm already stressed all the time. So I'm like, is it gonna be the same and I'm just gonna get off scot-free? Or am I gonna be a nervous wreck all the time? It's like, it's a gamble. It's like, which way is it gonna go? And then, so there's those ones. And then I think kids are expensive. It's like, I feel like that's less important to me, but it is a factor in terms of I would have less discretionary income. That said, I don't live a particularly bougie life as it is. I think I could be, you know, Jeffrey Bezos money and not, I don't think my life would change dramatically, because I'm not someone that, like I say to Daniel, I was like, you know those people, and I see them in London sometimes, and they wear like the Gucci tracksuit. I'll see if I can find a photo. I don't own anything designer, I don't think. Like nothing, you know, no Gucci or anything designer, high end. I do think they can be better quality, so I'm not having to go in any way of designer clothes. But as I was saying to Daniel, I get jealous of these people wearing Gucci tracksuits. And he's like, you don't own anything Gucci and you don't like tracksuits, so like, why do you care? And I was like, it's a valid question. What I've come to realize, I am jealous of how free they are with money. I'm more jealous of the fact that they could justify the cost of £1,000 Gucci tracksuit, because I could never justify £1,000 on anything for me. So if I'm going to spend £1,000, I'll probably buy a sofa or something like that's communal use, you know what I mean? I'm not saying I wouldn't spend it, but I think something that's just so like frivolous and just for you and just, you know, somewhat vapid purchase. I'm like, I'm so jealous. I'm like, I mentally could never do that. So I don't think the financials would affect me. I'm not going to be like, oh, I can't afford Gucci tracksuits anymore, because I don't buy them now anyway, you know. That said, there's always like daycare and nannies, if like, because I know, well, not nannies are quite expensive, but I know there's like au pairs, because au pairs can be cheaper than daycare, because daycare is extortion, and like that's a huge flipping cost. And then if you want to send them to private school or public school, and like, how do you afford that if you want that? And then if they go to public school, then you have to pay for a tutor if they don't have the, like, do you know what I mean? Like, there's just so much to get them into university, and oh, it's just so much. And then that's just like the practical day-to-day. And then I'm like, I like to travel. I've done some dumb things traveling that I absolutely would not take a child on, you know. I climbed, I'm gonna say it so I don't get, in case the government's watching. I climbed a shmishmore of China. I hope you figured that out. But yeah, like I've done that. I've done Machu Picchu. I've been into favelas in Brazil. I've What else have I done? I've done some dumb things. It's been a while. I've been to penis parks in Korea. Things you would not take a child to. And so I'm like, well, one, I'm not going to take a child on safari. And two, would that mean I can't go on safari or whatever it is, you know? So it's like, that's a question I ask. So to offset that, I've tried to do all of my silly adventure things early when I'm unaccountable and no one's dependent on me, because even if I decide to climb a volcano in Africa, if it erupts and I die, then my child's an orphan, and then like that's a whole thing. So I don't want to have to do that, because then I feel like even if they're not with me, I'm still responsible for their well-being, obviously. So it's affects you even when they're not there. So there's that. And then I ask myself the bigger questions of like, well, the rising cost of life, like housing, like my kids will never afford a house unless I helped them, you know? Then obviously bills, inflation, salaries, like salaries not going up, wealth gaps getting bigger, then obviously climate change. Climate change is getting worse, like where I've already thought about this, because I'm like, if I always play like both scenarios in my head, and I'm like, I'd have to live somewhere, because obviously climate change is bad, but certain areas of the world will get affected worse than others. So small islands in the Pacific will get obviously underwater because their only coastline, whereas like Switzerland will probably be fine because it's in the middle and surrounded by a lot of countries, things like that. So find somewhere more sheltered to bring up your kids so that they don't feel the full impacts. But like that's an awful thing to have to think about. Like, where is my kid gonna have the best version of the climate apocalypse? So there's that. Then there's also, then I always think like if you don't have a kid, that's the best thing you could do to help climate change, because you know the biggest impact on climate change is overpopulation. So you not having a kid will lower the population by 2, because me and Daniel. But not only that, because if you have a child and then they have a child and then they have 2 children and then they have 2 children and it gets bigger and bigger, and then that is how a family tree works. But do you see how one person at the top of a family tree causes all of this people? So all of these people are affecting the climate. So then I'm like, well, I could, if I stopped up here, I could cut an entire chunk off the tree, which in terms of climate change is good. But then I'm also thinking like that's a very Western ideology in terms of developing nations. You know, I think it's that Nigeria has like a crazy birth rate, and so does India, and obviously China has less now, but obviously just a huge population. So sustaining that's going to be impactful regardless. So it's like, makes almost my sacrifice, if I was to choose that, meaningless? I don't know, but then is that the attitude that everyone has and therefore stops me? Like, they're like, well, if everyone made a small, you know. But then I'm also of the, you know, corporations do more for climate change than any one individual could ever make a dent in situation. And like, I'm already like eat veggie and vegan, like it's, I'm already trying. The negative side, the whole like, do you want them kind of thing, like that's, I feel like finding external reasons to justify a decision almost. The biggest reason I think I do want them, or I think in theory I like the idea of, is I have a dog that I love an unhealthy amount, and I'm genuinely concerned that when she dies I might die with her because my heart will be ripped out of my body. But I enjoy looking after her. So like there is some level of maternal instinct in that, and also some sort of like meaning and value that I attribute to that. And I know I know this is absolute, and I know parents like rage when you like say, dog is not a child. I'm fully aware, but it's the closest thing I can like equate to understanding, rather than just like jumping in the deep end. I'm like in the shallow end being like, do I want to go any deeper? Is this enough for me? And so, yeah, so I'm like, well, I like looking after the dog. For context, we cook her food every day. We meal prep her food. She has chicken and rice with carrots every day. Once a week we cook it and then we heat it up every day, and she has that for dinner, so she loves that. And I take her for walks almost every day, and like when we were in Highgate I had to take her out twice a day, so it was like big. When you have to physically leave an apartment, you can't just like open the garden door and let her out in the yard. Bit more of a commitment, but it was never a problem. Like in every scenario I never regretted having her, because I was like, it's absolutely worth for me, the sacrifice of those small things is absolutely worth having her. So I'm like, I feel like on some level that's how people feel about kids. You're like, oh, I don't sleep anymore, but I love them, so it doesn't matter, right? So, and then, you know, when you are training a dog, once again, I'm so sorry to the parents out here, I'm trying to relate to you, but like, you train them and they like do sit, shake hands, and then when they finally do it, you're like, oh my God, surely that's similar to like, oh my God, they're taking their first steps. I heard, was it in Scrubs, Dr. Cox says having kids is like raising a dog that learns to talk, and that sounds fun. So I'm like, well, I love dogs, and a dog that talks would be great. So is that a kid? I don't know. And then I also like, so as an exercise, I tried to play out if I like, from this point in my life, I was pregnant tomorrow versus never had children, again, never had a kid, never had children, and see how those two lives would diverge, and then compare, say, 40-year-old me and 40-year-old me in both timelines. What would I picture them to look like? And then I could decide which one I'd want to pursue. So me without kids, well, I'll go with me with kids. Me with kids, in a perfect world, assume money is no option, because I'm perfect world. Like, if it's my fantasy, I don't have to worry about money. Don't bring me down with reality. I've often told my husband that. So that one would be having a nice house in the country with a lot of space for, you know, 1 or 3 dogs to run around, 1 or 2 children that I can then take on holidays in Europe because it's not very expensive compared to Australia, and then potentially private school or not. I honestly have done no assessment on that, but like, for the sake of it, we'll say private, but like, don't come for me. I've done zero research on that. I feel like society tells you that's better, right? I don't know. So that's that. Do my own, like, have my own space because one thing I really hate the idea of, and I'm so sorry if this is anyone, you know, each to their own, but for me, I compartmentalize everything in my head and in my world. So I would love to have a spare room that could be like the playroom and just like close off the mess. Because if I often think of, I've sympathized a lot with the parents in the pandemic where they were in like 1 or 2 bedroom flats with children for lockdown. I was like, congrats, that is my actual nightmare. Like, well done you. So yeah, having space to like have your own like adults living area and then a play area and like separation of church and state. I'm very secular. That would be the perfect world, right? Money no option, don't bring me down with facts. The alternative is that I would live a ninja, no kids, dual income. Because we save now for a family home, in theory. But then you're like, well, what would it be? I'd buy like a really nice apartment or terraced house in like West London somewhere. I would buy, I guess, designer things. I'd go to museums and that pretty much live what I do now, plus a bit more bougie because I don't spend money, as we've said. But like, so I don't know what I'd be missing out on is what I've come to think, is that if I followed that route down, you know, kid-free, what makes that different? So obviously if I have children, I know like the benefit of that is you have 2 children. Like, what's the benefit of not having kids to my life? So kids, obviously funny, like to hang out with them, they love you, you love them, emotional connections. Also you get to raise them, that seems fun. What do I sacrifice? What's the sacrifice for that life? Is it money? I'm already pretty happy with my spend. Could I have more? I don't know if it would actually change my life all that much, to be completely honest. Yes, I'd have slightly nicer house, slightly nicer things, but like, in terms of my basic needs are met, so I don't feel like, do you know what I mean? I don't think I'm gonna be buying Gucci tracksuits, even if I had $1 billion. Because that's just nothing I value. So money in a way, designer things. Time, I guess, would be the sacrifice. Freedom's a big one, I understand that. Because if you have no kids, you can just get a plane to France on the weekend. But if you have kids, you have to worry about their school and and it's obviously got to pay for their tickets, so that's a cost. So I understand that. So I'd say freedom is probably the biggest loss on that one. But then by how much? So I would say I'm fairly undecided. One thing that really bothers me, at least the way society treats mums, I feel like when you have a kid, like there's the whole thing of like dads are just babysitting and women are parenting, and like, you know, when dad does the bare minimum, he's rewarded, and women are like criticized for doing everything kind of thing. I understand that, that's already a problem. But I feel like a lot of the times, because of the demands of kids and work and everything that needs you, so you normally have like your relationship, your job, and your hobbies. That's kind of like the main 3 things you spend your time on, child-free. Then you have kids, and that goes up. So then something has to drop. Is it work? Probably not, you need to pay bills. Is it your relationship? That can happen to a lot of people. Divorce is a thing. Or is it your hobbies? And I think 9 times out of 10, the thing that goes is hobbies. And so I feel like a lot of the time people can lose their personality. So you chat to some mums and they haven't seen or read or watched or listened to anything for themselves. So they'll just, this is such a stereotype as well, like this is not going to be new news for anyone. But you know, they just talk about their kids' achievements, what their kids have been up to. And you're like, but what about you? Which is fine. That's their life. I really don't. I barely care about my own life, let alone try and tell you how to live yours. But it's more for like, am I consciously making a decision to essentially this version of me die, and then all I am is defined by others? And I really don't like that thought. And also physically your body changes, and so you lose your physical body, so you have to dress differently, which is why mum clothes are a thing. It's purely because they're insecure, guys. Like, mum jeans, don't tell them off, don't mock them. Yeah, just losing your spark, your interest, what makes you special, what makes you happy, other than your kids, you know? I just think, and I think that's a big thing of like, eventually your kids are gonna leave. You want them to leave, you want them to be successful. You want them to be able to have a career and move out and be successful. So I'm very conscious of like making sure that when the kids leave, I'm not just like an empty shell of a woman who has no interests or hobbies because all I did was look after my kids their entire life. So yeah, so that's my brain dump on you about kids. Tell me in the comments below, because I think it's really interesting and I think more people should talk about it, because I think not having kids is completely valid. Having kids, obviously completely valid. I think the most important thing is making a conscious decision. I think the most reckless thing anyone can do is accidentally get pregnant and then be like, well, I guess I'll just do this. Because I think unless you think about all these things, you don't know how to protect yourself. Like, I know freedom is going to be the thing I struggle with, so I would budget, you know, a babysitter and have a date night once a week, just something that was just me and my fulfilling my needs and giving me my identity, because I know that's like I will struggle with. But I guess that's different for everyone, and you need to like prepare for that. I say this all completely as a child-free woman, so I'm sure there'll be a lot of parents being like, no, not that easy, which I fully understand. But at least I'm thinking about these things and making an informed decision. Anyways, thank you so much for watching. Tell me in the comments below. I would love to know your thoughts. Do you have kids? Would you have kids in the current world, knowing everything we know politically and economically and climate-wise? Are you planning on having kids if you haven't already? But yeah, was having kids the best thing in your life? Do you regret having kids? Safe space, I won't judge anyone. All right, thank you so much for watching. Remember to hit subscribe so I can see you next time. Bye.